yourself as well.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you for inviting me to speak today. I'm very excited to talk to you all about registered reports. So just to give you some context as to why I'm speaking about registered reports today, I have reviewed lots of registered reports. I've written a how-to guide on how to write them, and I also wrote my PhD using only registered reports. So it was the world's first one to do that. So I'm very excited to talk about registered reports. And along the way, hopefully, I will talk about how registered reports solve some of the issues that you would have been hearing about over the last day. So some of the things like questionable research practices, p-hacking, harking, and publication bias. So first of all, I'm going to talk about what registered reports are. And then I'm going to touch on how registered reports are different from pre-registration, because that can sometimes be confusing. And I will talk through that by talking about what the kind of benefits of registered reports are. Then I'm going to talk through some of the unexpected benefits of writing registered reports that I experienced whilst I was doing my PhD. And then I will touch on how to write a registered report. Okay, so as I'm talking today, I would like you to think, keep in the back of your mind a study that either you're planning or you've conducted, or maybe that you're running at the moment, where you think that peer review before you conduct the study would be really useful, and or a study that you would like to get published. So keep those kind of two aspects in the back of your mind as I'm talking today. So what are registered reports? So this is the traditional publication model that we would normally use, where you develop your idea, you then design your study, collect or analyse your data, and then you write up your report. And at that stage, once you've already conducted your study, it undergoes peer review, and all being well, it will eventually be published. The difference with registered reports is that there is this two-stage peer review model. So you develop your idea, you design your study, and at that stage, you go through the first round of peer review. So you haven't run your study yet, but it undergoes peer review for the plan of your study. You then go away, collect your data, write up the report. It undergoes a second round of peer review. So at that normal stage where you have peer review, and then it will be published. So I'll talk through this in a little bit more detail now. So registered reports are called a stage 1 and a stage 2 registered report. So the stage 1, you write this before you've begun your research. So for a stage 1 registered report, you would write your introduction, you would write your method, and you would write your analysis plan. So your introduction, your method, you're writing them in full as they will be in the final paper. So it's not like registration where you're creating a different document. This is your actual introduction, your actual method, and then your analysis plan. You then submit that stage 1 registered report to a journal that accepts registered reports. So it's important to note at this stage that not all journals accept registered reports. And it will undergo stage 1 peer review there. So they don't have the results. So the reviewers are not swayed by the results of your study. They've only got to focus on your plans. So when they're reviewing at stage 1, they'll be looking at what's the theoretical rationale for your study. Is it a rigorous and robust method? Is it a robust method to answer your research questions? And they will also look at the feasibility of your study. So then it will undergo peer review. So it's the typical peer review process where you may receive a revise and resubmit. And once you receive, once that process is finished, you'll receive what's called in principle acceptance. And in principle acceptance means that the journal is saying, we will publish your study as long as you run it in the way that you've planned, regardless of the results, because the results are just the answer to your question. And we have agreed that you've asked this question in a rigorous way, and you've designed a study that can answer this question. So then whether your results are significant or non-significant or some other equivalent of those, either way, your study will then be published. So then you will go ahead and conduct your study. So you already know that your study is going to be published before you conduct it. And that is very motivating, especially if you've got, something that is going to be hard work to conduct that research. So Sam and I had a systematic review that we worked on together, and there were some dark days of coding that, and it took a long time, but it was motivating to know that it would be published in the end, and that all our efforts would be able to get out into that academic domain. So you conduct your study, you analyse it as per your analysis plan from the stage 1 registered report, and then you complete your stage 2 manuscript. So your stage 2 manuscript is, you've already got your introduction and your methods from the stage 1, that's already written up. All you would do there is you would change it from being, we plan to do this, to we did do this. Those are the only kind of changes you would make. And then you write your new section, so your results section and your discussion section. So at that point, your registered report looks like any other article. So if someone looked at it, they would just think this is a normal article. It's just the process behind it that is different. So you would then submit your stage 2 manuscript back to the same journal that you submitted the stage 1, and it will undergo the second round of peer review. So at this second round, the reviewers do not relitigate on anything that they looked at in the stage 1. So they're now that they've got the results, they're not allowed to say, well, actually, this method was not the right method. They can't review any aspect of the stage 1. So what they're focusing on is just the adherence to the stage 1 protocol. Did you do what you said you were going to do? And also whether the conclusions are based on the evidence. So are the claims you're making relative to the data that you have? And once it's gone through stage 2 peer review, it will then be published. So I'll talk about how registered reports are different from pre-reg by talking about some of these benefits of both of them. So registered reports are not the same as pre-registration. It can be confusing because people sort of say pre-registered reports and they are very similar names, but they are different. So with pre-registration, you have the time-stamped plan of your study that you create before you've collected the data. But what you don't have is you don't have the stage 1 peer review before the study is conducted. And you don't have the in principle acceptance. So first I'll talk through some of the similarities between registered reports and pre-registration. So both of them encourage you to do planning before you've conducted the study, and hopefully create more precise research questions and hypotheses. I would suggest that registered reports are superior in this respect, because one issue with pre-registration can be that when you're pre-registering kind of the top line details of your study, you may not have thought through all of the details. So you can sort of say, I plan to do this, this, and this, and then when you come to actually run the study, something doesn't work because you haven't thought through the sort of detail of it. Whereas with the registered report, you need to write down everything that you're going to do exactly as you're going to do it, and also plan your analysis plan. So hopefully you've thought through all of those different aspects. Both of them also reduce questionable research practices. So these are things that researchers might do consciously or unconsciously that kind of bias the results and create misleading research. So both registered reports and pre-registration, you've got your hypotheses there in black and white. You can't now go back and change them, so you can't engage in harking that Saji was talking about. And with registered reports, you also don't have the incentives to do these things because you know that the study is going to be published regardless of the outcome. So there's now no reason to try and change the results to be something publishable, that you know that they're going to be published. We know that both registered reports and pre-registration are associated with other open practices. So things like sharing data, sharing materials, and many journals that publish registered reports will ask you to share all of the data, materials, etc. associated with your study. So those are the kind of things where registered reports and pre-registration are similar. There are a few ways that they are different, and they're quite important. So in terms of eliminating publication or outcome bias, so where a decision to publish is based on the results. So this is like where, for example, if you get negative results or something that is uninteresting, then the journal may decide not to publish the results. It's basically the decision to publish based on the results. Here you can see that registered reports eliminates this because the decision is made to publish results blind before the study is conducted. So that means that we have a fairer representation of what research actually looks like because all rigorous research is published. For registered reports, you also get peer review when it's most helpful. So it's not super helpful to get it after you've already run the study and you've already done something wrong in the eyes of the reviewers. There's not much that you can do about it then when they say you should have used this measure or you should have had a different control group or something like that. Then there's not much you can do about it after the fact. You can run another study potentially, and that costs a lot of resources. So peer review in registered reports happens before you've done any of that, so before you've expended any resources. So you can actually fix the issues, fix the flaws that a reviewer might highlight in your research. And lastly, as I've already mentioned, registered report guarantees publication. So as long as you have that in principle acceptance and then you run your study as you've planned to do, then it will be published once it is completed. So I just wanted to go a little bit more into detail about the benefit of registered reports eliminating publication bias, because this is a really important one. And there is research to show that registered reports are working as intended to do this. And as I said, it's a really important aspect of registered reports because it's something that pre-reg cannot offer. So both of these show the same kind of pattern, and that is that there are very few unsupported hypotheses in standard reports. So if we focus on the panel on the right, this is some work by Anna Schiel and colleagues, and they coded the first hypotheses of standard reports and of registered reports. And as you can see, in standard reports, 96% of them were reporting positive results. So there's very few unsupported or negative hypotheses in the standard literature. Whereas in registered reports, only 44% of the hypotheses were supported. So this suggests that registered reports are a much more honest representation of what academic literature actually looks like and the complexity of psychological research. So I now want to talk about some of the unexpected benefits of registered reports. And as I said, I wrote my thesis as a registered report. So I literally wrote 3 registered reports and put them in wholesale into my thesis. And then I just needed to write the general introduction and the general discussion to bookend those registered reports. So one of the unexpected benefits was collaborative opportunities. So the people who are highlighted on this slide are people who were not within my supervisory team, not within my university, but who I reached out to for various reasons to help collaborate on this research. And at least the first author, Dan Simons, I didn't know him at all. And a big reason that these people said yes to collaborating was because I said it's going to be a registered report. So that meant that they knew that I cared about rigorous research. They knew that I cared about transparency. So it's kind of a shortcut to tell people what you value in research. And I think all 3 of these people sort of cited registered reports as being a big reason as to why they wanted to collaborate. So the next thing was collaborative reviews. So it's not just the timing of reviews that they happen before the study is run, but it's also the nature of the reviews as well. So in the top row here, these are all tweets from people who've written registered reports, and then the bottom row are all from reviewers of registered reports. And you can see that the sentiment is very similar for all of the authors. They're saying we were really, really happy to fix flaws in our study before we ran the study. It's so much better being criticised than being criticised for work that you've already completed. And likewise, the reviewers also enjoy reviewing registered reports a lot more because they can give feedback that can be actioned. They say it's much more, it's just great to be able to give feedback that can be acted on rather than having to review flawed studies that are being shopped from journal to journal. So I think it's a very different peer review process on both sides. It really feels much more collaborative rather than just being told you've done this thing wrong and it's being rejected. So the next thing I experienced was the fact that I could put my in-principle acceptance on my CV. So this is what one of my registered reports, what one of the articles would have looked like if it wasn't a registered report. So all the time that I was conducting my study, writing it up, and the paper was under review at a journal, it would just look like this on my CV. So it would say in preparation. And if I was going for a job or something like that, whilst it was on there, in preparation is probably not going to be considered to be a paper that is going to be published. It might be, it might not be, you don't know. So instead, as a registered report, this is what it looked like on my CV for that period. So it was already accepted at a journal, so I could put the journal on there. I could say that it has in-principle acceptance, so you know that it is going to be published, and I can put the DOI on there as well. So overall, it's just a very much more concrete output on your CV that hopefully will be considered by hiring committees, etc. So this one, I mean, I've kind of touched on it, but it definitely reduced my results anxiety. So I was no longer worrying about whether I would get a significant result, whether it was going to be exciting enough to be published, and indeed whether it would be published, because I knew that it would be. And that meant that you can stop worrying about the results and just focus on the actual research itself. I think you know, it's a really important when we're working in this kind of publish or perish kind of culture to have some anxiety about this aspect taken away. And there's a tweet here from Rob McIntosh that I think just illustrates this perfectly. So he says, today and last Friday, I had a data reveal party with collaborators to discover the results of a registered report. The excitement of scientific discovery minus the anxiety of publication precarity is joyous. So I think that just kind of sums it up and sums up my experience as well. So the next one is that messy research can stay messy when it is a registered report. So we know that research is messy, but the traditional publishing model encourages us to present our research as this neat narrative in which we've predicted everything perfectly, and thus it happened exactly as we predicted. And that's not the case. So I've linked to a blog here from Sarah Anfield where she talks about the beauty of publishing an ugly registered report, and I recommend reading it because it's a really great experience that she talks about, that, you know, the results weren't what she expected and it was really stressful, and then she realized it was a registered report, so it was going to be okay, and she didn't need to write a story that kind of told this fake story about what happened. So registered reports allow messy results to see the light of day. So as long as your study is rigorously designed, carefully analysed, it can be published regardless of the outcome. And this is what should always be the case. So that's messy research. But in my experience, I also had an experience where I had really neat research. So I had an experiment where the results were so perfect that I said to my collaborators, I'm really grateful that this is a registered report, because otherwise it might have looked a little bit suspect, because it was really, you know, it was that neat. So it's good for both messy research and also for the occasional beautiful bit of research. The other thing that Sarah Ann highlights in this blog is that when you don't have to worry about kind of repackaging this messy research, you can actually be honest about what went wrong, and that is really useful to other people. So, you know, if you're working in an area particularly where resources are limited, you know, where it's hard to get participants from, you know, there's a small group of participants, or you have limited funding, then having someone actually tell you, we did this, but we shouldn't have done that, we recommend doing this, is also really useful. So that registered reports allow you to report all of that messiness that can help the rest of the academic community as well. And that brings me on to my next point, which is that registered reports can also be a more efficient use of resources. So a single well-conducted study can be published regardless of the results, and that is because peer review timing can help fix the issues. So there is less need to shop your article round different journals, because it can be fixed at that first journal that you submit it to. So if they find a fatal flaw in it, you can fix it, rather than them saying, right, we're rejecting it and you need to submit it elsewhere. And the fact that you don't need to rerun studies until you get this publishable result also means that those who have fewer resources have a fairer chance of being published. So whether that's funding or participants, it kind of levels the playing field. And I wanted to kind of contrast it with this tweet that talks about someone's undergrad research, where they say that it took 2 years and 4 journals, 2 desk rejections, 8 revisions, and 2 successfully appealed rejections after revise and resubmit. So a very tenacious individual, But if you think about all of the time and all of the resources that it took for that one paper to get published, I mean, going to 4 journals, think about how many reviewers that was, all the editor's time. And this is also our time, right? Because we are these reviewers, we are these editors, just with different hats on. So registered reports can help reduce this because of the fact that flaws can be fixed earlier. And I just wanted to highlight some research that kind of talks about the cost of these kind of things. So the first one is estimating the cost of researchers' time spent on peer review. So they were looking at this shopping of articles from journal to journal. And in 2020, they found that 1 million hours spent on peer review. So in a single year, 1 million hours, that's the equivalent of 15,000 years were spent on peer review during that 1 year. And there's the value of that peer review here in monetary terms. So 1.5 billion US dollars in America, 600 million in China, and 400 million in UK. And then the second article here looks at the cost of reformatting articles. So when you submit it to a different journal, you might have to reformat it, and that takes up a lot of time. So they estimated 230 million lost in the equivalent time of just reformatting articles. So yes, it's a lot. And I'm not saying registered reports fixes all of this, but because you have that peer review, that ability to fix things earlier, it just makes it less likely that it's going to have to be shopped around from journal to journal. Okay, so at the start, I asked you to think about a study that would benefit from peer review before you conducted it, or that you'd like published. So hopefully I have persuaded you to at least think about registered reports as a way that you might want to conduct a study, and maybe to even think about writing one. So I will, in the final section, talk about how to write a registered report. And I'm going to be a bit cheeky and point to this article that I wrote with Chris Chambers on 10 simple rules for writing a registered report. So for those that don't know, Chris Chambers is kind of the godfather of registered reports and introduced them. And so this paper is kind of the combined experience of all of his work as an editor and reviewer and my experience writing them as a PhD student. So it is really a how-to guide on how to write a registered report. So in it, we talk about things like selecting a journal, because as I mentioned, not all journals accept registered reports. How to handle ethics with the fact that you have kind of stage 1 peer review, and also how to manage deviations, because as Saji said, deviations are going to occur, so you need to know how you're going to handle those. So I just wanted to highlight the first rule that we put in here, which was to learn on the job. And this was kind of from my experience of thinking about writing a registered report as a year 1 PhD student, and I thought, I can't write a registered report because I don't feel like confident to write a normal article, so I definitely can't write a registered report. But as I sort of started to write it, I realised that it was a really good way to structure my learning. Because I needed to write everything down, I could write down what I knew and then get to a bit where I was stuck maybe. So maybe I now need to estimate my sample size. I need to learn about power analysis. So then I would learn about power analysis and then write that bit of the registered report. So rather than like knowing everything up front, it just kind of structured what I needed to learn. So I think that is a good tip, to kind of like plan and write and plan and write and learn as you're going, rather than thinking, right, I need to know everything before I even start. So you have two main options for publishing a registered report. So journals, over 300 journals offer registered reports, and there's a link there so that you can see which journals in your disciplinary area do publish them. So when selecting a journal, you would want to check the disciplinary scope of that journal, the types of registered reports that they offer. So there are different types of registered reports, say qualitative registered reports. There's a range. You can do them for a meta-analysis, for a systematic review. So you'd want to check that that the journal accepts the type of registered report that you want to do. And then you'd look at their submission requirements. So things like, do they have rules on power analysis and things like that? So that can help you select which journal you want to submit to. Then the other choice, rather than going direct to a journal, is to go to peer community in registered reports, PCIRR. And this is a supra journal platform. So it is free to submit to, and it has broad disciplinary scope, and it offers every type of registered report that you can imagine. And again, you would need to check the submission requirements and make sure that you adhere to those. So we can talk about PCIRR maybe more in the questions, but this is basically a community where they will peer review registered reports, and then you can decide to publish them elsewhere afterwards. But you actually have, like, I will come to it in the questions. I won't talk about that now. So those are your two options. Then I just wanted to touch on time, because this is a criticism of registered reports. So because peer review happens before you've run the study and you need to get in principle acceptance, you can't run your study until you have in principle acceptance. So that means that time is kind of critical. If you're waiting for that in principle acceptance before you can get going. So for my first stage 1 registered report, it took 6 weeks, which was great. For my second one, with 2 revisions, and it took 19 weeks. And then for the third one, it took 30 weeks, which is more than half a year. So you could look at it and think that I just got much worse at writing stage 1 registered reports, but it kind of highlights the fact that it's difficult to predict how long it's going to take, and it depends on lots of factors. So I just wanted to highlight some time-saving solutions that you can think about. So if you're writing your thesis, then I would suggest that registered reports do save time, because you've already written it up and you can just put it wholesale into your thesis. I've already talked about starting early and learning and planning and updating. One thing that I did, because I planned from the outset that I wanted to only use registered reports in my thesis, one thing that I did was I had a middle study that didn't rely on the results of the first one. So I could kind of have 2 different ones going on. I didn't need to get the results of the first one in order to design the second one. There are also registered reports for existing data, so that's something that you might want to consider. There are programmatic registered reports, so this is where you just write one stage 1 manuscript, and that leads to multiple stage 2 outputs. So you just need to write one, and then you can publish 2 or 3 stage 2 papers from it. I've also linked to this community feedback on registered reports, and this is a dashboard that those that have written registered reports have fed in and said what their experiences of the quality of reviews are and the speed of the reviews. Obviously, I gave a bad review for that third journal. And then the last point is quite a big one. So this is scheduled peer review. So this is where it is scheduled in advance of you submitting the stage 1 manuscript. So with scheduled peer review, the peer review process can be days instead of weeks or months or half a year. So this is a figure of how it works. So basically, in the typical review process, you would write your manuscript, you would submit it, and it would undergo editorial triage, and then the editor would look to acquire reviewers, and then it would undergo peer review. With scheduled review, you prepare a snapshot of your registered report. So this is just one page which outlines the very top line aspects of your registered report. That's what you submit to PCI-RR, and that undergoes editorial triage. So they will then say yes or no, we're interested in reviewing this stage 1 manuscript. And if they say yes, then you can go ahead and write your stage 1. And whilst you're writing it, they will acquire reviewers. So they will then book in those reviewers. So you'll say, okay, I'm going to submit it on the 1st of August. So they'll book in the reviewers for that week. And then the reviewers have a week to review the manuscript. And so I did this a couple of years ago, and I got my reviews back, I think, in 6 days. So it's slightly different to the 30 weeks that I experienced previously. So I highly recommend this if you are, if you're time poor, if you need to be doing this within, a master's or PhD, or just if you need to be quick. And that brings me to the end of my talk. I've just put some resources here at the end. So a lot of guides on registered reports, on how to write registered reports. And then at the end, there are some links to research that is analysing how registered reports work. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Right. So we have time for questions. Going to come up. How should we do this? So basically, I can't get the roving mic working. So if you project your voice, and if you could somehow repeat the question in your answer, if you can, that would be fantastic. So if there's any questions from our online audience, I will be monitoring them. But let's just start with the floor. We've got someone straight out the gate. Fire away.
It's a simple question. Do you and the other people that use registered reports state it somewhere in their research, so that when we go looking
in the paper?
Yeah, because for me this feels like this would represent a lot of integrity, and I would read that accordingly.
Yeah.
And is that something that people do?
Yes. So I think in most journals, not every journal, it will say as the article type that it is a registered report. So in the header, it should say registered report. And then I think quite a few people also write registered report in the actual title of their article as well. So it should be obvious that it is a registered. Yeah, that's a good question.
I'll take one from online. So it's just been edited. So thanks a lot for the talk. The academic incentive structures usually reward novelty, significance, and storytelling over rigour and truth-seeking. My impression is that registered reports try to impose methodological discipline while leaving the underlying reward system intact. Discuss.
I mean, yeah. I mean, we are working in that publish or perish, industry. But as I said, it focuses us on the right things. So it does focus on methodological rigour and the things that are important rather than the results. So it also means that it is, I was going to say, easier to publish, but the route to publish is fairer rather than the traditional route where it might be just the reviewer doesn't like your results. Maybe they, contradict their pet theory or something, so they're going to reject it because of that. So it kind of makes it fairer, I think.
I would augment that. Do you want to say?
No.
I would say that two things. One is it operates within the existing incentive structure and allows you to align incentives with good practice, because you can publish regardless of the results. It's a win-win. You can do good quality research, but you get the kudos of getting a paper published. So it allows you to play within the existing system, but also do good work. But also, as sort of hinted at in the first question, there is definite far more esteem of having a registered report as well. So it is moving people's judgment of what is good quality research in the right direction. So it is moving the incentive structure from just getting a paper published and worrying about impact factor or how sexy your results are, to actually having that stamp of this is a registered report. So I do think it's doing both things, which is why, I love registered reports. Emma loves registered reports. And I was sort of doing a bit of admin, but there's obviously that paper by I know her last name, Soderbergh. What's her name? Courtney Soderbergh, who sort of showed you empirically that on every account, registered reports sort of outperform. Is it up there? I don't know.
Yeah, it's just it's just the last link on that.
Yeah, it outperforms standard papers on things like clarity of writing or the merit of the methods, and all these things. So there's a definite pull factor that registered reports have that will hopefully change incentives.
If you IRR, are also public.
Yes.
Awareness and also
Yes, question,
Just a curious question. This is from somebody totally new to this whole research thing. Registered reports, is it a new phenomena that has started, and is it aimed at stamping out these kind of paper mills, or has it been in existence for a while?
So it's been in existence for about 10 years. Yeah, so it's a very new thing. And I mean, the main thing I think that it is trying to do is to overcome publication bias. So to make sure that if research is rigorous, it gets published, rather than just if it is exciting or positive, because it means when just positive research is published, it totally skews what we think. So there are instances of effects that, where just the positive results are published, but they are just probably by chance, and that effect doesn't actually exist. So
I'm given to understand, like there are tier 1 journals and tier, in the industry. So would registered reports be in the top tier journals where that's how they process things?
I mean, I think they're across journals. So, like Nature Human Behaviour offers registered reports, for example. So a journal offering registered reports is kind of saying it cares about the rigor of the research it publishes and whether what it publishes is actually likely to be true.
But I think the PCI stuff is also taking the top tier journal aspect out of the equation.
Yeah.
Because it's standard review, it's a standardized review process that registered reports would undergo. And so really it's almost as if viewing journals as a reader's digest rather than a gatekeeper and a quality control check. So you're just using it as an outlet. So you really choose, it's more of a choice of where would it find its audience rather than where can I put it so that it gets this sort of semblance or a badge of rigor that's gone through the peer review. So it's not that all papers endorse and go along with registered reports, but there are now ways to sort of make them have a less of a gatekeeping role. So that's another aspect of registered reports that's good. One comment just to say online, which I'll just, because I love hearing it, is one of the great outcomes from registered reports, among many others, is the decrease of anxiety, especially within postgraduate students in relation to their work. Things like my experiment didn't work, or my thesis is a failure, I'm a failure. They no longer exist.
Yeah.
And I would add to that as well. I guess this is true of both pre-registration and register reports, is that the best part of a project, the best time of a project is at the beginning, because everyone's really enthusiastic and they've all got full of energy. The worst time of the project is at the end of the project, when you've got to write the thing up, and the last thing you want to do is spend weeks of misery reflecting on everything you did wrong and having to publish it, and how do I write it in 2,000 words or fewer or whatever. So like a registered report or a pre-registration sort of bottles up all of that energy and that willingness to go through and test out different ideas. What would be the most optimal way of building this study? So you're kind of really spending your energy really effectively at a critical point where it needs to be spent. And the I'm sure you've already touched on this, Emma, about the idea of as you know, writing a paper is very daunting and time consuming and drain on your energy. But you're kind of front loading that with a registered report. So it's not as if it's going to be more work to do the registered report, because you've already kind of written the paper. So there's, as well as the lack of anxiety and all of the other good things, is that it does make efficient sense as well. Yeah.
I have two questions really about in principle acceptance. So my first is that it's based on, from my understanding, it's based on your adherence to your stage 1 thing. So at stage 2, so what happens if you have deviations that you need? Do you still have that? Like you're not guaranteed that in principle acceptance, right? Because of the stage 2 review. So what's the
So the in principle acceptance happens at stage 1. So that's when they're reviewing the first part of it. So they're saying, we will publish it if you do what you say you're going to do in this. There are always going to be, or mostly going to be, deviations, and some of them are going to be small and some of them are going to be big. So if you have a small deviation, you would just report that transparently in the stage 2. So you would just say, no, we planned to do this, but this happened, so we did this. If it is something larger, then you need to go back to the editor and tell them, like, this issue has come up and we need to deviate. And the editor will maybe make a decision on it, or they will, if it's a really big thing, they might send it back to the reviewers again and ask them to comment on that. So there are lots of ways to handle it. I think like over the 10 years, there's only been one registered report that wasn't published because of deviations. That was because there were major deviations and they didn't go back to the editor and discuss it. And then they were like, well, you haven't done what you said you were going to do. So yeah, it's definitely an important part of running a registered report, is making sure that those deviations are discussed if necessary, but reported transparently either way.
My second question was about PCIRR. With those in principle acceptances, are you accepted to a specific journal with that? Yeah.
No.
How does that work?
Yeah. So do you want ECR?
Yeah, so for that, so you get this in principle acceptance from this organization, and then you can take it to other journals, and a lot of journals would accept this as if they have done their own in principle acceptance. So it will go highly faster in terms of like how you have to before you have to just submit for each journal and then going through the register, the first stage. And this would really makes it more efficient to get to that.
So I just add to that. So PCIRR has two sort of groups of journals. So one of them are called friendly journals and the other are interested journals.
Yeah.
So for friendly journals, they have committed to say, we will accept PCIRR's review process, and any article that gets stage 2 acceptance, we will publish in our journal without further peer review. So basically, when you get that in principle acceptance, PCIRR will say your article will at the end can be published in this list of journals, and so then you as an author have a choice of where to publish it. So we're kind of like turning it on its head. So you can say, okay, I want to publish it in this one. With the interested journals, they have not committed to publish it, but they will get notification of stage 1 in principle acceptances, and then they will potentially write to the author and say, we're interested in publishing this in our journal. And yeah, so that's the two sort of different groups of journals.
Yes, at the back there.
Everyone.
Good question. So, but there are multiple reasons. One reason is that, like registered report has also strong registration, and as I said, there are people that don't apply to the same philosophy that goes to behind this method of working. Secondly, it is still very incentivizing for people to do a very, very high impact journals that they still don't accept registered reports, and it's very incentivizing for them to do this because it is very risky, but it still have this probability even low to be accepted in that, and that can have a huge impact on their career. So they are willing to take that chance to go for those journals. And
I think it's also just like apathy in the academic system, like the same with any change and move to open research. Why do I want to change it? This has worked out well for me. I'm already a professor. I don't need to worry about doing it in this super rigorous way. So I think it's partly that. I think the time issue is also a criticism. So you might just need to run your study soon. So you might not have time to write your stage 1 and then get in principal acceptance. So I think some people might not think about it in time to be doing that. But I mean, I agree with you. So basically, I found out about it when I was doing my master's. I did my master's on ego depletion, which some people might know is one of the big culprits of the replication crisis. So as I was doing that, someone sort of mentioned pre-registration to me, and then I found out about registered reports, and I was like, why is all research not published in this way? That's why I wanted to go down that route. So yeah, Sam, have you got any other kind of reasons?
Yeah, I mean, sort of a historical one. I mean, registered reports aren't new. I mean, like there's that sort of cute point that I guess Chris and other people make about the fact that, was it parapsychology kind of came up with the idea of pre-registration like centuries ago. We've known how to do proper research for centuries. It's just the incentives have made it really difficult to do that. And it's much easier for you to publish a poor study and get the kudos for it than going through what appears to be a more laborious and time-consuming process, which is actually not the case. So the incentives are an issue, but I'm repeating what has already been said. I guess there's also to bear in mind that, you know, register reports you have to do at the beginning of a project, and it's very difficult to sort of retrofit register reports in ongoing studies. But you can also do that as well. So it's kind of a misconception that you have to do register reports at the beginning of a project. So you've got lots of studies now that do data collection in waves. And so the study might be ongoing, but they do a register report on the data that has not yet been accessed. So they might say, okay, we'll do this sort of protocol for how we're going to analyze the data and things like that. So there are ways to plug it in for ongoing studies, but I think generally speaking, it's most amenable to those studies that are just launching off. But I would also say as well, you know, much to the credit of Chris Chambers particularly, and Emma, even though I know she's in the room, but there's been lots of progress in mainstreaming registered reports. Like if you look over the past 10, 15 years, it's actually unbelievable just how more widespread registered reports are. Nobody thought that Nature would take on registered reports, and yet the Nature group have, you know. So I would say in another 15 years, it would probably become far more difficult to do the standard traditional types of research papers. And I say that without, you know, being too overly optimistic. Yeah, you've got a question here.
The work that's registered way higher, but the other kind that was spoken about before, of course, this has only been going on, as you said, for 10 years and being taken more seriously. So there's obviously, I want to write my own thesis at home. So I'm thinking, do I just rely on registered reports just like yourself, which sounds like, as you said, it was a world test, or can I use the other things that are already out there? What's the credibility of somebody not? So I don't want my work to have less, you know, this girl didn't use the right stuff. That's why I'm curious.
Yeah, so I myself, I think, yeah, when you look at when you have this title or like this part in your paper that has like that shows that you have done registered report, it shows that there is a strong thought behind like rigorous way of research, but its absence doesn't show the lack of it. So I always like to remind people that it doesn't mean that if you're doing a standard way of publication, it doesn't mean that it is less valuable. Or
that's what I was going to point out, because I remember, because I was listening in before I came in, and she said even if this is not when you were speaking, even if it's not registered, it doesn't take away from the value. So then my curiosity was, when the other lecturer started speaking, which one has more gravity, or which one is seen more heavily in academia? That's the angle I was trying to get at. Sorry, that makes sense. Even though I think both of your sides are strong, but I'm just trying to ensure, because I want my work to be strong.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think what Saji said, you know, the fact that it isn't pre-registered or isn't a registered report doesn't mean that it's bad research. You know, and there will also be bad research that is pre-registered. Like, just because it has a pre-registration doesn't mean we should say, oh, that's definitely great. If it is a registered report, then you know what process it's been through. You know that like the stage 1 is there. You can have a look at the stage 1. It's publicly available. You can compare it to that. But I think with something that it isn't a registered report, you always need to be reading it with a critical eye, right? And thinking about, you know, is it possible that there was hacking here? Is it possible that there's p-hacking? What about the other studies that aren't published in this area? If everything is, you know, positive. So I think it's just reading it with the critical eye that you always would.
So registered reports are going to be good research because of the process that's gone into it. One doesn't need to be more cautious. I'll just be honest, being honest.
Yeah.
but when I read it, I don't need it as much of a cautious eye on that versus the non-registered. I know it's a bit an off question, but
So now I still say no because I mean at the first part today, I mean you weren't here, but Sam mentioned about the problem of peer review. So even if it is peer review, there is always a chance that there is some problems in the peer review. So you never know how much peer reviewers put time, and if we rely only on peer reviewers for quality control, this is the thing you have to accept that. Yeah, you can never be sure. So
I think the reason why we're giving quite evasive answers is because we know that having quite an instructive lesson here is there used to be this sort of enthusiasm for open science badges. So you would have on papers badges that would indicate whether the data was open or whether it was pre-registered or whether it was a registered report. And that's great, but the badge, because then it signals to other people that this is, you know, of this particular quality or whatever. But what quickly happened was you could get a badge, but it may not be a good indicator that the data is fully open or that it was properly pre-registered. And the thing is that researchers are very good at gaming metrics. So it would be unwise for you to read the literature with this rule of thumb of registered reports are better quality than pre-registered and pre-registered better than traditional. You need to evaluate all the literature equally with the same critical eye and not sort of lean on heuristics or sort of easy metrics. That's not to say that registered reports are of equal value. I think obviously they're going to be stronger, but they're not completely absent of any issues. I mean, the other thing is that registered reports do not guard against fraud. I could say I'm going to pre-register my study, but not disclose that I've already done it. Or I could not disclose that I've already run the analysis, so I know exactly what I'm going to do. So you could, if you want to, with bad intent, do a registered report on a bogus study, essentially.
It would be hard to do that though, because the peer reviewers are going to ask you to change things, which if you've done it, then you can't change. So it'd be harder.
Yeah. Okay. Or I could submit it to a bunch of other journals and sort of get the one that wins.
Yeah.
Right. So if you really wanted to, you could do it. Now, I'm not saying that the academics have got enough time to do that, but it's just a point that, as what has already been said more eloquently, that, you know, it's not a perfect sort of silver bullet. It's as close as we can get to a silver bullet, but it doesn't mean that you have to relax how you critically evaluate studies. I think one thing that's quite instructive for me is that if you do a registered report, you do become a better reviewer of other papers. So I think actually the process is really good for instructing you as a critical reader of the literature, because I know that when I've done a pre-registered or registered report, that I'm more motivated to say check whether a paper was pre-registered, and if it was pre-registered, is there a consistency between the pre-registered outcomes that they said they were going to test and run versus what was actually published? And oftentimes they're not the same. They've switched them around and things like this. So I think the actual a byproduct of doing registered reports is that you just become stronger in your sort of red flag detector. Let me just check.
Answer that really quickly.
Yeah.
What Sam has just mentioned also highlights a benefit here, which is that you can check that, right? So you can go to the pre-registration and see what they planned and what they said they were going to do. With the registered report, you can go to the stage one and have a look at what it said. Often with registered reports, the reviews are also public, so you can have a look at what the reviews say. Whereas with the standard literature, you can't do that. You can never know like what the authors planned, whether they are harking, etc. So
yeah,
it makes it transparent basically by having these procedures.
Question for standard reports and stuff like that. does that mean the reviewers don't get to see behind the report as well? What was initially, they just see what was presented?
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. They might not see the data or anything either. They just see whatever the authors have written, and that's it.
We have lunch waiting for us.
Could make it fun to like email you or chat.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
we can
she's-
take
she's-
questions
yeah.
at lunch as well.
Yeah.
So
So you're currently my hostages because only I know where lunch is, right?